Hey there, friends and running fans. This is Ampy Burfoot, welcoming you to the latest episode of the podcast, Running State of the Sport.
And this is George Hirsch, your co-host at Running State of the Sport. In every episode, we talk to the smartest, most informed, most influential, and sometimes fastest runners on the planet.
This week, we've got a great conversation with Daniel Romanchuk, the recent wheelchair winner of the New York City Marathon. This is our first podcast with a wheelchair racer, and we learned a lot, or at least I certainly felt I learned a lot.
Daniel has impressive versatility in the sport. Last summer, he participated in the Paris Paralympic Games, where he won a gold medal and a bronze medal. He told us, however, that we should duck for cover if we ever see him throwing the discus.
Indeed, he did.
Yeah, but before talking with Ted, and I hear your little barking in the background there. Excuse me. Let's go from the beginning. It's Daniel, not Ted.
Yeah, start with but before talking.
Huh?
Start with just before talking with Daniel.
Okay, I won't mention the dog barking then.
Okay. Maybe I can cut him.
Okay. But before talking with Daniel, we want to review some of the biggest running news that's going on. Amby, what's been on your radar lately?
Well, there are a lot of little things, but one that's really quite big is that we finally have a seventh member of World Marathon Majors. This was announced right at the finish line of the New York City Marathon. And the seventh is, drum roll, the Sydney Marathon in Australia, which was, I think, expected, although there were a couple of other names tossed around. And it was greeted with excitement by some and a little bit less enthusiasm by others. There was certainly chatter out there in the social media world about why do we need 6 and 7 and 8, 9, who knows how many world marathon majors? Isn't it better to have 4 like in tennis and golf and some of the other major sports? So that'll probably be continued to be debated for a while. But Sydney it is, and I have no doubt that a lot of runners are going to want to go there because it's known to be such a spectacular world city. Also at New York, someone who didn't get a lot of publicity because he finished, I believe, in 10th place was our old friend C.J. Albertson. But that 10th place of his was a 2:10:57, which was the slowest of his 4 marathons this year. He's had an incredible year. And of course, because he's C.J. Albertson, he's not going to stop now. He's going to do another one. So he's going to tackle the Cal International Marathon the first weekend in December. He was the winner last year. Let's see if he can do it again.
I think he'll perform well. He seems to have recovery between races mastered more than any professional marathon runner that you and I know. He just, I don't know, he just seems to take a few days off and maybe
what's amazing,
and he bounces back. He's extraordinary.
Amazing to me because we have known through the decades a few guys and gals who would run marathons pretty close together. But if they were guys, they might have been 2:14 or 2:15 if they were having good days. But when you're in the 2:08 to 2:11 range, as CJ is, that's a whole nother ball game. I mean, that's true elite world-class marathoning, and he's kind of got a handle on the repeat marathons at this point. So, George, what was some of the biggest running news that you paid particular attention to?
Well, I paid a lot of attention to the New York City Marathon, and it was just spectacular. It was perfect conditions, 2 great races in the men's and the women's division. The wheelchair racers were fabulous, as we know from talking to Daniel. But it was the biggest number of finishers ever in any marathon, 55,646, breaking the recent short-term record of Berlin by around 1,000 runners. So these races seem to be edging upward. Chicago, Berlin, New York, over 50,000. They all get many, many more entrants, of course, than they can handle. And you're never sure in these races. You can make estimates from prior years, but you're never sure how many are going to show up at the starting line. And then from there, exactly how many will finish. Perfect conditions like we had in New York puts the finishing rate way up there, close to 99%. So we had that big field. I think we and the other marathon majors don't regard the size of the marathon as all important. It's not a big bragging rights thing, but it certainly does speak to the incredible strength of the sport these days. So the size of the New York City Marathon and the entire event itself. And the other thing I take out of those 55,000 finishers is the retirement from professional running of Jenny Simpson, whom, Amber, you know, is a big favorite of mine. Jenny and I are close friends, and I've loved her career. It's one of the great American careers in the middle distances, 1,500 meters and the mile, and she's medaled at the world level, and she's held numerous records even since her college days as a multi NCAA champion. But most importantly, it's the way Jenny has carried herself. She's been just a fabulous uh, personality and ambassador for the sport. And when I saw her here in New York, she told me that she and her husband Jason are going to get in a Winnebago and they're going to travel around the United States for a year and just kind of depart from all the years of hard training and all the work that she's put in. And all I can say is a big salute to a wonderful champion, Jenny.
Well, I think the same because I had the sense that a lot of us have dreamed or at one point said, I'm going to jump in a little RV and tour the country and say hello to the people of America and find out what's going on east, south, north, and west. But none of us ever do it. And here, Jenny and her husband are doing it. So all power to them. And that's the big news as we see it here at Running State of the Sport. Now let's turn to this week's guest, Daniel Romanchuk, on the podcast Running State of the Sport. Daniel's a wheelchair athlete, which is a first for us and a lot of fun. He competes in both track racing at the Paralympic level and road racing and marathons on the roads. In fact, in early November, he won the New York City Marathon for the third time and then went on just a week later to set a course record in the BAA Boston Half Marathon. Daniel, thanks so much for joining us here on our podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So, Daniel, hi, this is George, and it's great to have you with us. And first, congratulations on another big victory here in New York. We'd like to begin by asking you to fill in some basics, biographical details. How old are you? Where do you live? What do you do during the day after the morning alarm clock goes off, and so on? Let's let our listeners get to know you a little bit.
Yeah. And so I am 26 years old. I live out in Champaign, Illinois, which is about 2 hours or so, depending on traffic, south of Chicago. And I'm actually part of the University of Illinois wheelchair racing group that's all down here. I'm one of the athletes down here, and yeah, I live in Champaign, and am a professional wheelchair racer.
Great. So here's a question I haven't asked anyone else on a podcast before. You've got an unusual last name. I'm not sure I've come across it anywhere else, and apparently it is Ukrainian. So, of course, right away you wonder, do you actually have family back in Ukraine? Is this something that kind of on your mind in these troubled times?
Well, it's certainly something that has been on my mind. I'm not aware of any. I don't have contact with any family there. I'm not sure how much family is there right now or anything like that. But it certainly has been something that I've has been on my mind pretty frequently at times, and I've been able to work to well not necessarily work with I've donated to groups like Johnny and Friends who aid in evacuation efforts for people with disabilities and things like that. So it certainly has been something on my mind.
Well, it has been for lots of us, of course, but I'm sure it's much more so for you, George.
Yeah. So Daniel, let's go back to competition here now, and we mentioned your recent big win in New York and your record-setting win in Boston. Tell us a little about each of those.
Yeah. And so I had a great end to the season. Yeah, New York was a small pack for a lot of the race, pretty much the whole race really. And so it's really fun to get back into pack racing a little bit more. Nowadays it's over the last few years it's been very kind of very drawn out. Just kind of just single people kind of on their own to a lot of large degree, and it's but really fun to get back into that small pack racing. And you certainly had a fun time in Boston. Actually, both of my youth coaches were they're from Boston, and so it's growing up I heard lots of stories about Boston. So it's always fun to go visit Boston.
So we're going to talk about the program at Champaign in a moment, but in New York City, your teammate Susanna Scaroni won the female side of the race. Did it Was it kind of special to have both of you win, and how much do you see each other and train together?
Yes, so it certainly was amazing to be able to win both the male female wheelchair racing categories with a teammate. We are a part of a team that trains. We basically train 6 days a week, 1 to 2 times a day. Each session might be an hour and a half long. At this point, we've pretty much now that the season's over, we've transitioned to all indoor training. Um, so we're on rollers, which are basically our version of treadmills, and so you can basically think of a 55-gallon drum, but just shrunk, and that's what our back wheels are suspended over, and then the front part of the chair is kind of just strapped down to keep us nice and secure, and so it's basically a treadmill. And so we'll be on those throughout the winter, probably until somewhere in March. Usually, depending on the weather. If it gets nice, we'll start to go back out in March. And we're also doing strength training maybe around 2 times a week. Um, but one of the really kind of interesting things is, you can look at a number of wheelchair racers, and you start to, yeah. One of the things that comes to mind is, wow, like they must lift so much, but we actually don't. We really want to, kind of watch how much we lift, in that we don't want to restrict our mobility and flexibility, because our stroke technique is actually a very, very vital part of the sport. A lot of a lot of pushing is more technique than strength.
So interesting. I think most of our listeners, Daniel, are runners, probably don't know an awful lot about training for wheelchair racing. And I think listening to this is interesting. You do it 6 days a week, not unlike most of the other runners. How would you describe what you would say are your hardest workouts, the peak ones when you're getting ready for big championships?
Oh, I would say it's in the spring and the fall. Those are our marathon seasons, so we try and get out onto the roads. Just get out for more miles, and so that always has a little bit of an acclimation period. Something we can kind of get into on the rollers is just letting our head, looking down, basically. But when you get back out onto the road in the spring and you have to, look up and look where you're going, your neck can get quite sore for
Hmm.
the first few times out on the road. So I'd say that's actually one that can be quite difficult.
It's occurring to me, and we didn't write this down as something we wanted to ask you. It must be quite dangerous to train on the roads with who else out there trying to be on the roads, barreling along at 70 miles an hour or whatever. Do you have to find special little used roads to train on, or do you just find the least traffic you possibly can?
So I think we basically go out. We all go out as a group, and so we're not, usually, you know, there's not a singular person out on the road with no one
That's
else in
good.
sight, kind of a thing. We'll naturally kind of string out a little bit. But yeah, we all go out as a group. We have flags that we get on our chair. So hopefully that increases our visibility. And then also, we do try and avoid kind of peak times, certain roads, and things like that. Because yeah, safety on the road is certainly very, very important.
Safety is job one for everybody out on the road, I think, no matter how they're getting in their workout. So I also wanted to ask you, how and why has it happened that Champaign is kind of the wheelchair racing capital of the United States, at least? And I'm really interested in your treadmill. I'm gonna After this conversation, I'm gonna look one of those up and see if I can visualize what it's like. But why
Yeah.
Champagne?
So an adaptive sports program kind of started with the university a long time ago, and I think right now we have just a really, I mean, besides the history here with the program, there it's just a very unique mix of athletes and coaching and facilities, and so. Um, I think that's, really kind of just why it's kind of known for wheelchair racing. Um, yeah, a number of athletes like Jean Driscoll, Tatiana McFadden, and a number of other athletes have come from the program. So um, again, it's just a really great mix of a lot of different things that just um, allow for the just progression, and regardless of whether you end up going to going to the games or into elite sport or wherever you end up.
Hmm. So, Daniel, we have to ask an essential question about how you became a wheelchair athlete. Did you have a
Yeah.
condition or did you have an accident?
Yeah, so I was born with spina bifida, which is basically when the spinal column does not fully develop correctly, and that leaves nerves exposed and they get damaged. And so, whatever below that opening, does not work properly.
So I heard a amazing story that I'm going to ask you to kind of repeat for us. That when you were young, I think this was 4 or 5, maybe your parents, maybe the world at large thought, Daniel, you can walk. Get out there and walk. Whatever effort, struggle, assistance you need, learn how to do this. And at some point you said, no, that's not what I want to do. I would rather be in a chair. And you had an amazing
Yeah,
reason why. Could you tell us that story?
yeah. And so with spina bifida and the my level my lesion level, we really didn't know whether I was going to walk or not. And so the first I'll say 5 years were spent figuring out if that can happen and what that would look like. And so basically, I had braces that came all the way up to my armpits, and um, I also used that in conjunction with either crutches or a walker. And so, as you can imagine, strapping yourself in braces that are pretty much it's a whole body like exoskeleton, basically. Um, and crutches was not a simple thing to get into. And so, by the time I'd get strapped up and um, you know pretty much walk from the accessible parking spot to the front door of the grocery store or the library, wherever we were, I was already tired at that point. And then if I made one little mistake in the store, boom, over goes the
Oh.
leaning tower of Daniel, crashing on the floor, creating quite the commotion, and everyone comes running seeing if I'm okay. And I was fine. I just needed to needed some time and space to figure out, okay, how am I going to get back up. But yeah, after about however many years of that, so I was around 5 years old, I basically said, you know, I want to use the chair. It's easier, for me. It's it's simple transfers from seat to seat. It's faster. I can get where I want to go easily and quickly. So that's I basically just said, I want to use the chair. The chair is freedom for me.
I want to note that George and I both chuckled a little bit during that story, which might sound harsh, but we were actually looking at you telling the story, and you were telling it with a smile on your face. And so we didn't feel that we were being critical when we laughed over how difficult it was, because it sounds really, really hard. I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
George?
Speaking of really hard, Daniel, you have two older siblings. And what was it like trying to keep up with them in life and sports? And that probably couldn't have been all that easy.
Yeah, so we all really it was great having my both of my older siblings growing up. You know, uh, we all actually swam on some swim teams together. We all played sports really. And so a lot of our childhood was running around, driving from this competition to that competition, practices, and back and forth. So it was really, really, an amazing to have them growing up.
You were living in Baltimore at the time when you were a youngster, and at some point you joined a program that was called Bennett Blazers, which was apparently for wheelchair athletes, young ones. What was that program about? What did they teach you, and what did you learn from the whole process?
Yes, so the Bennett Blazers is a physically adaptive sports program out of Baltimore, Maryland, and so not just for people who use wheelchairs. They also have some ambulatory things as well, I believe. And yeah, I certainly would not be where I am today, without the amazing foundation that I got at that program. Their motto is "Teach kids they can before someone tells them they can't."
Hmm.
And so, growing up in that atmosphere was just so vital into to make me kind of who I am today. Um, I it really molded kind of how I look at a lot of things, I think. So actually, I was at uh, I was kind of a guinea pig for a new classifier. So in swimming, for example, they people have different classes depending on their impairment level and things like that. And so they already knew what I was, and there was a new tester that they wanted to kind of see what they would classify me as. And so I was the guinea pig, and so I go through pretty much the whole process. We're at the end, and they ask me, what is something that your disability, impacts? Like what can't you do? What does it not allow you to do? I sat there thinking for probably a solid minute, trying to think of something. And I came up with, well, if something is up really high, I might not be able to get it. And my mom, who's there next to me, just kind of starts laughing, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what's going on," and but it never occurred to me that I couldn't walk. And so, again, just that growing up in that mentality of focusing on what you do have and what you can do, and figuring out how are you going to use those things to reach your goal, has had a huge impact on me.
Hmm. Really interesting. You mentioned swimming is one of the sports. And tell us about any other sports that you participated in and probably found pretty challenging as well.
So Bennett was a multi-sport program, and so I think I was swimming at 3. I was playing wheelchair. I was racing, and um, I think I started basketball at 4, sled hockey, and a number of other sports that they offered all the way through up to college. So one thing I would say, I mean, a couple things I would say. Um, One was the discus. Of the 360 degrees it could go, you never knew which one it would go. And basketball. Well, I could get up and down the court pretty fast, but if I took a shot, you didn't really know where that ball was going to end up.
Okay, so if we ever see you doing the discus at some athletic competition, we should run and hide.
Yep,
Yeah.
take cover.
I thought you were going to say your mother was chuckling because she was going to respond. But Daniel, you can always reach up and grab the cookie jar, even though it's overhead somewhere. So
Yep.
I think you actually did your first marathon in Baltimore when you were 14, which seems crazy. Can't think of anything else. Why a marathon at 14, and what was it like? do you remember your finish time? And did you say never again, or did you say I want to do a lot more of these?
Um, oh, I'm trying to think back to that. So I think it was kind of just the natural next step. And we didn't really know how it was going to go. So really the goal was finish. I think I finished in somewhere just over 2 hours. Um, and so, but I I didn't certainly didn't dislike it at all. I grew up in Mount Airy, Maryland, and so the Baltimore Marathon had lots of hills. I'm not sure what the course is now, but back then there were lots of hills and in it, and so I kind of enjoyed the course. That really something that I've always enjoyed, just kind of pushing myself and seeing how far can I go, how fast can I go, and things like that. So nothing went so wrong that I was like, that nope, not gonna do that. But I think I definitely took a probably took a solid nap after that.
And then you won your first New York City Marathon in 2018, and you were just 20 years of age. And
Yep.
Daniel, I certainly remember it. We sat together at the luncheon the next day, and uh, I thought I thought you might have been overwhelmed by the whole thing, and yet, even though you were a youngster winning the New York City Marathon, my recollections of you right away were you were awfully grounded and poised. But tell us inside you what you were thinking. I mean, that was a darn big deal.
Probably was still kind of processing everything that was going on. As you kind of said, I was probably a little bit overwhelmed. But it was amazing to be able to win the marathon, New York Marathon. At that point, I my both my sister and brother-in-law live in New York, and so I actually, I always try and see them. At some point, I think I tried to see them right after the race, but I believe there was we ran into some accessibility issues with the subways, I believe. But again, just amazing to have family there, and really just an overall amazing experience.
So, Daniel, we've been talking about the roads primarily, but of course, that's not the only thing you do. In fact, you were a participant in the Paris Paralympic Games this summer, and you've been to the Paralympic before. What was Paris like for you? What was the general environment there, the reception from the French people, and how were your competitions? I'll roll it all into one question.
Yeah. So just again, an amazing experience. It's always an honor to be able to go to a game, to a competition like the games and to represent the U.S. And I had a great time there. I was quite busy. I had the 400, 800, 1500, 5000, and the marathon. And
That'll keep you
so
busy.
Yep. And then there's prelims and finals for everything but the marathon. And so um I certainly was did not really get any time to go and explore much. My map of Paris pretty much consisted of the village, venue, and my family had an Airbnb that I went to a couple times to go see them and spend time with them. That was like a few minutes walk from the village. But again, an amazing experience. I was able to come away with the gold in the 5000 and bronze in the 400. and so in honor to be able to bring back some medals to the U.S.
Couple of medals, pretty impressive. What were, if you want to share, what were your expectations going in with that uh, range of events that you participated in?
Yeah. So I really one thing about the male T54 category is that it can pretty much be anyone's race on any given day. And so really I wasn't sure entirely what to expect going in, especially at the games. Usually some more people that that don't do the marathon circuit are there, and so really don't have much experience with some people, and but really I pretty much approached it like I pretty much like I do every other race, is just go in with a plan, but knowing when that gun goes off I'm probably going to have to adapt.
Daniel, through my career as a journalist and an editor, I feel like I've gone through a number of different names that we're told we should be using with athletes like yourself. And I admit I'm confused. You're the expert. When I was young, there was disabled, and there was handicapped, and there was challenged. Do you have a preference? Do most of your colleagues have a preference? And is it a sensitive question?
Personally, not at all. I don't really have any preferred terminology there. Um, but yeah, it's for some people they do. But I personally am not really specific when it comes to that.
So many endurance athletes say, it takes a village to support
Hmm.
them, and they have a team. And is this even more true with wheelchair athletes? And who are the important members of your team? And I think your mother, I know her, and I think she obviously plays a key role. So tell us about that.
So it certainly does take a it while marathons and wheelchair racing is an individual event, so to say. It's a team effort. There's really no doubt about that. Yes, it's certainly my mom has been there from the start. Going taking me to practices and competitions, and flying around the world with me. She certainly has been a vital team member. Yeah, I recently was married, and so now I have my wife, kind of supporting me, and we're supporting each other, and it certainly does take a big team.
Say hello to your mom. I missed her this year after the marathon. Usually I catch up with you guys, but this year I did miss her. So give her my.
Will do.
And congratulations on the recent marriage. I myself didn't know about that, so that's a
Thank you.
wonderful thing. But by my count, and I could be wrong, but I have on my list that you've won four of the six marathon majors: Boston, London, Chicago, and New York. So I'm wondering if you got any plans to go after the two. Oh, now it's three, isn't it? You got to go to Tokyo, Berlin, and Sydney, which is apparently the toughest course on the circuit. What are your plans?
Certainly at some point, I hope to be able to add those, but again, the category is very tight, and so we'll see what happens. I try not to set necessarily. I I try not to set goals that are out of my control. If I set a goal before a race, it's usually like actually the Chicago Marathon is a pretty good example, because I've used that as kind of a benchmark as how racing has progressed over the years. At first it used to be stick with the front pack for a mile, then 5 miles, halfway, and eventually I can stick with them, but then it's trying to pay attention to what's going on in the pack, and trying to make sure that no one's breaking off of the front, and lots of things like that. So I really try and keep them as much as I can, within my own control.
So, Dan, you talked about how racing has progressed over the years. How about the changes in promotion and payment to wheelchair racers since you've begun in the sport, like 6 years ago? How do you feel about that, and what more needs to be done?
Yeah, it certainly has come a long way. I've certainly seen great improvement in in prize money equality, and things like that. For course record bonuses, and in a number of other places. I think the one thing I could say potentially could be a place for improvement is, I personally can support myself racing, but that I think there are very few um, who can, and I'd like to see that increase. Basically see the pay depth increase, I'll say.
That's a really good one. Aside from the money in the sport now, which is a good thing for everybody, and we all
Yep.
support that. As an individual, is there something more you get from being part of this sport or part of wheelchair racing besides, dollar signs and interviews and podcasts?
Yeah. It certainly is. I enjoy it, and it keeps me, fit and healthy. And I think I've made some great friendships through racing. And so yeah, certainly a number of other things as well. Yeah.
So, professional runners get their biggest sponsorships from running shoe companies by and large, and that's not the same for wheelers. So, what are the companies that are actively supporting some of the best wheelchair athletes today?
Yeah, I think the having the Abbott World Marathon Majors series is a great thing. Um, you I think that increases the publicity of the sport, and that's something that I've also seen progress, is just the visibility of wheelchair racing. Um, it certainly has come a long way. I personally am sponsored by Abbott and Cliff Bar. I work with Top End, my chair manufacturer, my racing chair manufacturer, and so I do some development work with them on trying to make equipment high performing, yet try and reduce the how much it costs, because really in these past around the past cycle or so. So cycle being the a Paralympic cycle, so 4 years. The equipment costs for the high performing equipment has gotten just very expensive, and so trying to work with them to develop high performing, lower cost equipment. And but back to sponsors. I don't exactly remember who I've named off, but I have a number of sponsors, but um, and that's certainly something that I've seen progress over the years as well. Is companies are bigger companies are sponsoring para athletes. which is just, again, amazing to see. Because I think that really shows that they see value in Paralympic sport, and that brings more visibility to it, which gets more people involved.
Daniel, we've got just one last question for you. Thank you for being with us today. Since the podcast is named Running State of the Sport, we ask everyone, what is the state of the sport today? And you've answered that a little bit already on the lack of depth and payment. But what do you like about this sport for yourself, your fellow competitors, and everyone out there on the course with you? And what do you think could be a little bit better, perhaps?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'd say it's certainly certainly an amazing uh an amazing sport. It's really it's allowed me to, as I kind of previously mentioned, stay physically active and fit, and really, I think just continuing to like both of you having me on the podcast, continuing to spread the word that adaptive sports and running, things like that, they're out there, is really that's just vital part of continuing the growth, I'll say. And just I still receive messages from people who are I'll say 20 miles from a local program, but they know nothing about it. And so again, I'd say just getting more word out there is really what I'd say I'd like to see.
One more question.
Go.
We'll get.
All right.
Okay. So sometimes we ask our guests when we conclude what we call the three fairy godmother wishes, and we only give three, and it's what you'd like to see. Could be for yourself in the next years. There's the LA Olympics coming in 2028, maybe for friends, for the endurance community, for the wheelchair athlete community, anything you choose, three wishes.
Oh, I would say, um, yeah, continuing, continuing development on, on affordable wheelchair racing equipment. Even a basic racing chair, it costs $5,000, and so, uh, you know, I'd say, developing more affordable equipment. Um, so I actually recently started a nonprofit, Wheels for Change, and I'm really looking forward to that, the international arm of that grow, and so that, I guess, maybe my second wish, and then, oh, for the final wish, um, dry race days going forward.
That- that's a great one. Well, listen, we love all those answers. Certainly, spreading the word is a big mission for all of us. Making the sport more accessible and affordable is a big object for all of us going forward. And you really represent those things well. So that is it today for our podcast conversation with wheelchair racing champion Daniel Romanchuk. Daniel, thanks so much for spending this time with us today.
Thank you all for having me.
Amby, that was a terrific conversation with Daniel Romanchuk. He's only 26, but he's already achieved an awful lot in the world of wheelchair racing. What struck you most about, what he told us?
I really appreciate it, as I always do, when an athlete presents himself in such a humble and self deprecating and even humorous way. Daniel told us a few stories that were classics, especially about how when he lets go of a discus, you better be careful because he doesn't know which of the 360 degrees it might be coming from. Also, He's really hoping to make wheelchair racing more accessible to many. And I particularly liked the youthful comment when, at about age 5, he said to his parents, I don't want to try this walking anymore. It just isn't working. The wheelchair to me would represent freedom because I would be able to get around quickly and nimbly. And that's such a head spinning thought for those of us who have never had difficulty walking. You have to think about it for a minute or so. And then you're like, yeah, he really did have more opportunity in the wheelchair. And boy, Daniel Romanchuk has certainly taken advantage of that. George, what resonated most with you?
Yeah, I liked that a lot, and I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember the exact phrase, but he talked about focusing on what you do have and not what you don't have. And he talked, about beginning to be a swimmer when he was at age 3 and a basketball player at age 4, and then, playing sled hockey and moving up through other sports until, of course, he became a professional athlete as a wheelchair racer. The other thing is, we asked him our standard 3 wishes question, and I liked an awful lot what he said. First is he would love to see more affordable racing equipment for recreational athletes, not the pros, and that he's working in that space and letting us know that just a normal racing chair costs upwards of $5,000. And his second one was his own nonprofit, Wheels for Change, which he would love to see really grow and take off over the years. And then third, he said, and I like this, he said, days, this is days, race days when it's dry out there, meaning the conditions are not wet and rainy.
Yeah, that one was great because again, it's a special wheelchair perspective. I know quite a few marathon runners who like rainy marathons because it keeps their body temperature cool and helps them perform. But when you're in a chair on just a couple of wheels, obviously a totally different thing. And that's it for this week's episode of Running State of the Sport. We hope you enjoyed joining us as much as we enjoyed sharing the time with you. We'll be back again soon with another episode. Until then, please tell your friends about Running State of the Sport. We'd also appreciate a review at your favorite podcast host like Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts. In signing off, here's our hope for the state of your own personal running. Chin up, clear eyes, full heart, keep moving, onward.